Welcome into another episode of Transformations with Ordinary Pioneer. My name is Halina Schriefer. I'm the founder of our spiritual healing community in Whitehouse called Ordinary Pioneer, and I'm here to welcome my dear friend and guest, Dr. Moriah Timko. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And Dr. Timko has an incredible transformative story through healing through breast cancer. So we're here to kind of learn a little bit from her and what she's been able to create through all of this past disease that she's gone through and really create an incredible impact in our community. So just kind of take us back a little bit, several years back to your diagnosis with breast cancer.
So it was 2016. I was 33 years old. I had already been practicing internal medicine as a hospitalist in Toledo for about 5 years. So I had a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old at the time, and just found I had always benign, like fibrocystic breast disease, and then there was a spot that just kind of seemed to get bigger, and then I found another spot. So I was too young really to get mammograms at 33. I had no family history or anything of breast cancer. So I got ultrasounds, and then they said, yeah, this looks concerning enough. And so I got biopsies and got the horrible news over the phone that it was in fact malignant. And I had 2 spots, so it was multifocal breast cancer.
So tell me a little bit about the treatment process from that. So going into that and going through the treatment, what did that look like?
So I ended up having to meet with a surgeon, and so we had to make the decision. It was pretty much made for me that I had to go with a mastectomy. I couldn't get lumpectomies because I was so small, and because it was in 2 different locations, we had to just do the entire mastectomy, and then she recommended a prophylactic left. So I had it on the right, and then I was so young to not get breast cancer on the other side, they suggest a prophylactic mastectomy on the other side. So it was estrogen and progesterone receptor positive and HER2 negative. So it was good that it was hormone sensitive. I guess if I had to get a cancer, it's good that it had the best prognosis. So I ultimately had to undergo a double mastectomy. And then during the surgery, that's when they check your sentinel nodes. So they do a sentinel node biopsy. And so we weren't sure if it had spread or not. So they have a pathologist in the OR, and they check, has it in fact metastasized or spread to that sentinel node? And unfortunately it did. So in the OR, that's when the surgeon decides to do a axillary lymph node dissection. So I ended up having everything removed, and then the lymph node dissection, which can end up leading to like lymphedema and stuff in your arm. And so at that point, I didn't know that if it had spread to the lymph nodes or not. So coming out of surgery, she told me, yeah, you had the sentinel node positive. I knew I was upgraded to stage 2. So you still don't really know what stage you are until the pathology comes back on all the lymph nodes and you've gone through all the scans. And so I had like drains in, and a week later I had to meet with the surgeon to find out about the final pathology.
And how long was that time frame of when you first were diagnosed with the initial cancer through the final knowing that you were stage 3, correct?
Yes.
But the final, what was that time period like?
I think I ended up, I was diagnosed in September 22nd, and then I had surgery October 5th. So they tried to get me in as quickly as possible. The surgeon knew that I was young and anxious, and also being in medicine, I was extra scared.
Mm-hmm.
And so then, because I know, what can happen and things. And then I met with her after surgery about a week later, and unfortunately found out that it had spread to 4 out of 10 lymph nodes. So that's when I was upgraded to stage 3. My mom was with me, thankfully, and was really supportive. And then, so that ultimately the surgeon says, well, at this point, you do have to go for chemotherapy and radiation. I still had positive margins though after surgery, which was kind of scary. And so there was a question of if I needed more surgery or a boost for radiation. And it was so complicated, I ended up going to Ohio State for a second opinion. And luckily, the PET scans and everything were negative, so I did not have stage 4.
Well, thank God for that.
Yeah.
And you're here, and I'm so blessed that you are here and to share with us this journey. And what would you say, going back and remembering, what was that like emotionally, discovering all of this, and not only that, but this time period that you had to wait to, find out what the treatment plan was and where the final diagnosis was going to be with the stage 3. What was going on emotionally through that?
It's those 5 stages of grief, I guess, and I didn't even recognize really the shock initially. Just, no, this can't be happening to me. I'm healthy. I was 33. I had no medical problems. I ran 1 to 2 miles a day. I've got little ones I'm running around after. And I was in denial. And no, this isn't me. And it was almost surreal. Like, this is my worst nightmare coming true. And, I guess I just didn't take a positive spin on it, like, oh, well, there's treatment for this, or, I'm lucky that I have friends and family in Columbus at Ohio State. I got in right away. It was so devastating to learn that my body did this to itself. That anger, it just, shock, denial, anger, all at once. And you go back and forth between all of these emotions. And, unfortunately, my spouse at the time didn't really offer that much emotional support. And, I had family, not a ton of friends in Toledo yet because I had just moved a few years prior, but it was rough.
And there's like almost like this feeling of like betrayal from the body, right?
Yeah,
of
exactly.
Like, why? And I know that feeling for myself in a different way, but to feel you should be working, you're here to work for me, and you're built to heal, yet why is this happening?
Right. And I knew I never smoked. I didn't drink alcohol. I was a runner. I tried to eat healthy. And I'm like, why did I get sick? Mm-hmm. Why did this happen? And so looking back, I think, geez, maybe I wasn't sleeping enough. I certainly was working hard as a hospitalist and every other week at the hospital. I think stress had a lot to do with it. Mm-hmm. I do.
And now you mentioned your mom being there for you throughout this process. What did your support system look like?
Well, my mom was there during the diagnosis, and then post-operative. She's a nurse and helped me through that. I could always call her every day, but she had to go back to work in Nebraska and couldn't get off work to help. So my dad had just retired and actually moved up to Toledo and stayed in an apartment for 6 months and helped, cart the kids back and forth to school. He helped with meals and just watching them, and then taking me to all my appointments. So
it's incredible. The support system is so helpful when we have something like this and the mind just kind of shuts down. I don't know what to do, and we're kind of forced to feel these things that are very uncomfortable, the fear that's coming up. Mm-hmm. What would you say, how did your life begin to transform since your diagnosis? What was kind of going on in your life at that time?
I think, like I said, I was working, so I had to get off work and figure out how to take like short-term disability. Luckily, the hospital system was really understanding, and my practice and partners were, of course, all surprised that this was happening. But it was pretty easy to take off work. I guess that was good, and financially, we were in a position where it wasn't too stressful. Luckily, we both worked, and that wasn't too bad. But I think the worst part was that I was almost like embarrassed. Like, I didn't want to tell friends, or it was an odd sensation. And then when I had the surgery, I didn't want to go out. Or when I started losing my hair and I was bald, like, I'd go to the grocery and I was really afraid. It was wintertime and I was afraid to catch any viruses or bacteria and get sick. But it was the stigma where people would stare at me if we went out to restaurants, and I remember a little boy and his dad just kept staring at me, and I had a scarf over my head, but I was so just timid, and I didn't wear my cancer proud on my sleeve. I started turning into a recluse. I got pneumonia my first week of chemo. I got strep throat, all the side effects that you can think of a lot with the chemo I got. And so I felt like an island, I guess. Like, I don't need anyone. And friends would call me like, hey, you want to go out to the movie? Or, and the weather had a lot to do with it. It was winter and it started to snow. We had cold weather. And so I just started just staying in.
Why do you think that is when we have, whether it is a cancer diagnosis or some kind of a big trauma, that we hold back from sharing and letting other people in? I know it's kind of a tough question, but kind of reflecting on that. Or another way to ask would be, when did you start sharing your story?
I think I hadn't really accepted that I was the patient. That was hard. The loss of control was one of the hardest things for me to deal with. And I'm very type A, got through undergrad and medical school in 6 years instead of 8. And I was always the fixer. I was always trying to help people feel better. And, I think to take on this role and to be the patient was really hard. And to show up at Ohio State and get chemo every 2 weeks, I got a port put in, and just them hooking me up to that. And every time they had to flush the port with saline, you could taste this nasty salt taste, and I would just dread it. And I hated being the patient. Honestly, I didn't deal with it well. And it was hard. I felt so alone too, because all my friends still were taking their kids to school, doing the mom thing, going to the grocery, all their activities after school. And I remember showing up to school with my dad to pick up the kids, angry. That why isn't it that mom that got this? Why is it me? And that why me? And, it sounds kind of trite and sad, like a little pathetic that I was feeling that sorry for myself looking back. But it's just so angry. I got off of Facebook because I saw a lot of my old classmates with their families and pictures of, their picture perfect family, and then thinking of how dysfunctional mine was at this moment, where, my spouse wasn't really helping going to my appointments with me. He wouldn't take off work. And so there was a lot. I was ashamed, I guess, of not dealing well with the cancer, and I hadn't accepted the diagnosis yet, so I wasn't quite emotionally, I guess, there and moving forward with this. I was just so angry. And at that point, eventually I saw a psychologist at the Victory Center, and I think it dawned on her and I that I wasn't doing well with this.
And then through the therapy and all of the wonderful, shout out to our friends at the Victory Center for all that they do, this nonprofit in the Toledo and Perrysburg, they have a Perrysburg location as well, offering support to cancer patients and families as well, different fundraisers, wellness events and classes. And so when you started seeing a therapist and getting involved, what did you notice? Did you notice a shift in there, or were you able to come to a place of acceptance?
Not yet. I went to the cancer support group, and again, I was 33, and there were all these women in their 50s, 60s, and then there was even a younger lady who had just found out it had spread and she was metastatic. And so that it was almost more traumatizing to me. And it was nice though that they were like, yeah, we remember that time, when you didn't have hair, or when you couldn't taste anything. And so it was a little bit comforting, but I looked around the room and I'm like, they don't get it. They don't understand that. I feel like my body was I hate to be vain, but I couldn't wear a bathing suit anymore, and it was taken from me, and my femininity was gone, and just my job that I had been working on, kind of getting up off the ground, was at a standstill, and I couldn't be the mom that I wanted to be at that moment. And so it made me more upset, I think.
So much kind of in addition to the cancer diagnosis, seems like more was kind of piling on top of you. I mean, the whole life on pause from what you're saying, that, you had all, your life was going and everything was well, like you said, you were running and healthy and all of these things. And then being stopped in your track. Yes, of course. Like, that I can't imagine how isolating that would have felt, even, when we're going through something, and sometimes we get in conversations where somebody may have something similar, but still in that mindset that we have of, why me?
Yeah.
This is, I am separate from everybody else, and nobody understands how I feel. I imagine I guess my question would be, was there depression along with that?
Yeah, as you can kind of foresee. And you did just kind of jog a memory for me, actually. One of the mothers of a son in my son's class reached out to me. We had never talked before, and somehow she heard through the grapevine that I was just diagnosed. And it turns out she was my age and a hand surgeon. And she had just experienced stage 3 breast cancer that year before. And so she goes, I understand what you're going through. This sucks, like cancer sucks, but I'm here if you ever need to talk. And so I was like, yes, sure. And so she came over, gave me all her old scarves. She actually gave me one of her old wigs, and we both had like brown hair, so that was nice. And, she's like, ask him this and see, about that. And so that's when I finally felt like, wow, like this is my person. She understands what it was like to be, a young professional. Her spouse was also a physician, and little ones, same age. So that I finally felt like I made a connection, and like, okay, she's on the other side. Like I could see that she made it and she was cancer free. And so then maybe my attitude started to change a little bit at that point, but I was still, I think, suffering because of, my spouse not being emotionally there for me. And then at one point he did end up telling me he wanted a divorce, but he'd get me through the treatment, and then, we would see.
So whole life just kind of transforming in such uncomfortable ways. And what an angel your friend was, to be able to share with you and this message of hope. And that's really the whole intention of the show, is to be able to show people that, yes, this life is so hard and we get faced with so many different challenges and traumas and different circumstances that are incredibly uncomfortable to go through and to feel our way through. And yet on the other side, we can see, and you're doing such incredible work. And I want to transition to that, because you've been able to take all of what you've learned and to be able to bring it back out into the community. So tell us a little bit about what that looks like.
Sure. So to kind of get to the point where I finally accepted my diagnosis, was probably into radiation. And I made a good friend, was my radiation technologist, shared with me that she had a thymoma. And so, it was nice, again, meeting someone else who was like in their 30s that had experienced some physical illness. And so I ended up, getting a little bit more involved at the Victory Center. They offered like yoga classes to cancer patients, Reiki sessions, massage therapy. And so, they even do art classes there. So I started getting a little more involved there. And then I saw a therapist, which was paramount. I think all cancer patients should see a psychologist or have a counselor of some sort. I moved out. I physically moved location so that I could have my own space. And my parents finally understood what was going on and were there for me, and had to give me some tough love. I mean, they really did. And the therapist gave me a lot of good advice too, and that helped me prioritize like my family, my kids, and why I need to fight. And so I figured that out through a lot of work. And then I had told you I really connected with Christian music, and that helped like give me a new life. And going back to church, I found like a community, and my neighbor actually was like really involved there too. And so we've become good friends. She's a mom with kids in my kids' class as well. So I started seeing a reason to live, that life wasn't over. Having 2 traumatic issues going on at once I thought it was just so devastating. But I figured out that I still had my family, I still had friends, I had my kids to live for, and that, I deserved better. So I started getting more involved. I joined like a dance class and met more friends. I figured out that even though I didn't have hair, it was going to grow back. And, I figured out how to like dress properly after having mastectomies and feeling more feminine. So that helped. But also, I realized that they push in medical school. A lot of us physicians are so stressed in learning the disease processes in the body that we forget about the mind and the spirit. And so that's why, I've started my own kind of business trying to fuse Western medicine with like Eastern medicine, traditional techniques. So you've helped me actually with Reiki, the meditation and yoga at my first fusion medicine retreat at Wildwood last year. And that was just great to share that with the community.
And I'm so grateful that I was very excited to meet with you and to know that, in what you've gone through and how you've been able to transform that into letting people know that even though we have, these certain physical ailments that are happening, that stress is really a big root of that. And there's, we can do all the these beautiful ways to support ourselves physically, but there's a mental and emotional and a spiritual aspect to that has, such a great weight on our healing and our rate of healing and how we heal. And it sounds like you really tapped into that in your journey of, that was able to kind of transform you from being, stuck in these stages of grief and anger and everything going on. That's so very valid. But recognizing that this isn't what my life is going to continue to be, and to be able to do something so very good with that. And so you're hosting these retreats. You're going to have a couple throughout the year, correct?
Yes.
So how do people get in touch with you and to find out what retreats are coming up?
So I have a Facebook page, Fusion Medicine Retreats, and then I'm still working on the webpage. But I post on there like when the retreats are going to be, and then the dates and times. And so I end up putting an event page on Facebook so people can like or say that they're interested in the event. And then you can buy tickets on eventbrite.com. So we try to sell tickets so that we know how many people are attending. And then I include other physicians like myself and Dr. Gokula. So we'll do like a mini physician like lecture series. And then we combine that with like yoga, meditation, aromatherapy, the crystal sound baths. We actually had like some hiking at Wildwood. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun.
A fusion of all these different modalities coming together to just support the community, whether you are going through some sort of a bigger diagnosis or just wanting to really better your experience in the human body and in your mind and in your spirit.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for putting all of that out there and for really sharing with us this passion that you have to educate and to support us, in our well-being. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for being here on Transformations with Ordinary Pioneer. Thank you to our community of Ordinary Pioneer for participating in these conversations. And I invite you to comment if you have any questions for myself or Dr. Timko. If you're going through something similar or you need help and you want to be connected to any resources, there's so much available for you out there. And I want to take a moment before we close to pause. I invite you to put your hands on your heart. Take a deep breath in and deep breath out. Knowing that, yes, your body is created to heal. Your powerful mind can provide you with the will to overcome any challenge that you're faced, because you have all the answers inside of you, all of the tools to move through and experience the truest parts of your spirit right here, right now. Thank you so much. Much love and appreciation to you. Namaste.